It's been more than 2 decades since the largest terror attack on American soil.
And then all of a sudden a person on the street yells, "Oh my God, a plane's gone into the World Trade Center." And I yelled back, I'm in my short summer pajamas, bare feet, "Are you kidding me? My wife works there."
Each year, the families of victims mark the moment they lost loved ones and remember the promise the U.S. made to never forget.
Susan M. Getzendana.
My uncle, firefighter Frankie Esposito, and cousin, Captain Michael Esposito. As I get older, it gets harder to see the sadness amongst my family with you gone.
Life for everyone changed. American Muslims say that nothing can ever be the same. Overnight, every Muslim became a perceived threat. Hate crimes against Muslims have continued, and in the recent wake of the Gaza-Israel war, the situation has deteriorated further.
It's still Muslims who are being stopped at security checkpoints when they try to travel abroad. It's still Muslim names that are on, disproportionately on the no-fly list. So there are these structures of anti-Muslim bias that were instituted over 20 years ago.
Decades later, we've come to meet those who've lost loved ones, who have fought for justice, and the Americans who say they are committed to fixing a legacy of foreign policy that has torn apart communities.
We have live coverage beginning with Alex Gaynor in Lower Manhattan. Alex.
Weather-wise, it's a nice morning, just like it was 23 years ago. In so many ways, it feels like this just happened.
September 11th is a day every year that means something to everyone. Although younger generations are less and less aware of what happened here more than 20 years ago. But no matter how old you are, the legacy of the attack on the Twin Towers has had an impact far further afield than New York City. This monument is a place for remembrance, reflection, and tribute to the 2,977 people killed in the terror attacks of September 11th.
9/11 changed this nation. Here at the site of the former World Trade Center are memorials to those who lost their lives in the attack 23 years ago. As Americans remember September 11th, 2001, it's also important to educate the next generation on just how pivotal that day was and continues to be in American history.
It's down.
Oh, say, can you see?
Every year, the names of those lost are read out loud. One of them is Catherine Wolfe, who died when Tower 1 was hit. Today, I'm meeting Catherine's husband, Charles Wolfe.
Hey, Charles, how you doing?
I'm very good. How are you doing?
Good, Nathan Howard. Thanks for taking the time.
Nathan, very nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Want to walk over and talk down here?
Sure, why not? My name is Charles G. Wolfe. My wife was killed in the World Trade Center on 9/11.
Tell me about your wife, Catherine.
She was an absolutely delightful person. It was just like, it's almost like I won't want to say an angel in human form. I think that would be going too far. But it was just once she got the feeling that it was okay to like me, and it was just, and everybody loved her, and I mean, she could play the piano like you wouldn't believe.
Can you walk me through your memories of the day on 9/11?
She almost forgot to kiss me goodbye. She would stand on the top step. We have a 2-level apartment. She would stand at the top step, I would stand on the next one down. We matched perfectly. We give each other a hug, and no kisses though. Didn't want to mess up the lipstick. And maybe a kiss on the cheek. And off she went. And I watched her walk down the hall to the elevator, and I wish I could remember the exact skirt she was wearing, but I don't. But that's okay. And so I went back to work and got some of my own breakfast. I was sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden I hear, "Woo!" like that. I go, what the is that? And I said, I knew it was a twin-engine jet at full throttle. And then all of a sudden, a person on the street yells, "Oh my God, a plane's gone into the World Trade Center." And I yelled back, I'm in my short summer pajamas, bare feet, "Are you kidding me? My wife works there." And I grab the keys and I run downstairs and I run out on Thompson Street, and I'm One World Trade Center at that time was directly at the end of the sight line of the street, with other shorter buildings in front of it. And I saw this gash that everybody's seen, and I'm thinking, what do I do? I'm thinking in my mind, what do I do? I'm running through, my mind is just running through options. Should I do this, 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 this? And I realized, no, don't go down there. Don't go down there, because it'll be chaos. And 2 moving targets can't find each other. She just got a cell phone. She's just going to run down the stairs and so forth. I can't tell how high it is. I'm thinking it's in the 80s, but it's actually 97. It's like, and so I said, 2 moving targets can't find each other. And I said, I'll be the stationary target. She might not remember my cell phone, but she will remember the home phone. Because again, cell phones were new. And so I went back upstairs to wait. I figured I'll be the stationary target. I will be there when she calls. I don't want her to go through this and not have anybody to get a hold of, if you follow what I'm saying. Not understanding clearly the enormity of what had just happened. So I said, well, I'm not calling 911 because everyone else in the world is going to call 911. I'm calling the FBI. So I call the FBI, get this guy on the phone. I said, that plane flew right over our apartment. I said, that was a twin-engine jet at full throttle. And I said, and that was deliberate. That was no accident. That was a deliberate.
Charles was unhappy with the U.S. government-run September 11th Victim Compensation Fund and the man who had been assigned to run it. So he set about campaigning for the families of victims. The story of the campaign was made into a Netflix film.
It's a national emergency.
Charles set up the website fixthefund.org to pressure those in charge to allocate funds more fairly and to more people. And after years of hard work, it was successful. What has it been like having the work of your life memorialized in film?
My life was not memorialized. My work, one of my projects was memorialized. But I was very active with things, and as things started to normalize, I was an advocate. I was an advocate for all these different things.
My daughter's worth just as much as anybody in a corner office.
My wife died that day, and everything about this formula offends me. Sorry.
Charles says that the work must continue through education.
Why not?
How important do you think it is to educate the generation that wasn't alive?
Extremely important. It was a terrorist attack. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what political party you are. It was a terrorist attack. Period. 4, not just 1 tower, 2 towers. The Pentagon, it was supposed to have been the White House. That's what they were aiming for. Couldn't find it. It was smaller than they knew. Couldn't find it in the morning glare. And of course, there was Flight 93, which was brought down in Pennsylvania before it could get to the Capitol building. This is war.
Are you guys in the right state of mind? Let's go.
President George W. Bush announced a comprehensive plan to seek out and stop terrorists around the world. He called it the Global War on Terror. And in the years following, America and her allies invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. Guantanamo Bay was established, and everyone who was deemed a threat was caught and detained, many for years without trial. The Council on American Islamic Relations say that 9/11 was a turning point for Muslims in America, and more than 2 decades on, that history is repeating itself.
I think it's safe to say that the environment in New York right now, in terms of anti-Muslim hate, is something that the community hasn't seen in over 20 years, since 9/11. It's at extraordinary levels. And that's just based on the reports that have come into us and our organization. We've seen massive spikes in terms of hate crimes, assaults, bias incidents in general, and incidents in school, in the workplace.
American Muslims say that the sustained discrimination they have felt for the last 2 decades is far more widespread than anyone could have imagined.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Muslim New Yorker who hasn't lived through some kind of discrimination in the period immediately after 9/11 and today. I think unfortunately, we've either gone through it ourselves or have a close family member or a loved one who's gone through something like that.
Following 9/11, the FBI engaged in profiling and surveillance of Muslims, and a climate of fear and mistrust was established that had serious implications for American Muslims.
I think the most common thing is everyday incidents of bigotry, being called a terrorist, being linked in some way to the attack, and being portrayed as the other, being portrayed as un-American. I think that was extremely common, especially after 9/11. And it never really went away. I think it was kind of an ember that continued it continued on to the present day, when it has unfortunately become lit again.
Growing up in New York during the time of 9/11 is a uniquely traumatic experience for every New Yorker.
I grew up in Brooklyn, just over situated very close to where I grew up. And I remember vividly the 9/11 attack, because I was in school at the time, and I just remember seeing copy paper and bits of debris flying, just floating in the air. They'd floated over from Manhattan and just totally covered the area where my school was. And my teacher looked out the window to see what had happened, and she saw that the Twin Towers were on fire, and she just started sobbing. And we didn't know what was going on, and to a certain extent we were shielded from that image, and we were let go early that day to be with our families. But I do remember, immediately thereafter, that Muslim kids, the Muslim identity would be treated as something un-American. Kids would, on the playground, they would play, Americans and terrorists rather than cops and robbers. And it just became a given that Muslims were something other than the standard, what you think of as the American ideal. It's still Muslims who are being stopped at security checkpoints when they try to travel abroad. It's still Muslim names that are on, disproportionately on the no-fly list. So there are these structures of anti-Muslim bias that were instituted over 20 years ago, and they persist to this very day, even though it largely goes unreported.
Figures show an increase in incidents of Islamophobia since October 7th, 2023.
I think it probably has much to do with the trope of the Muslim terrorist and the equation of those two terms in the American imagination. And so whenever there is an act of terrorism, it is connected with Islam as a whole. I also think that after October 7th, we saw an amazing outpouring of support for the Palestinian cause from our Muslims and brothers and sisters from all walks of life. And I think to a certain extent it was a backlash to seeing Muslims vocal and in the streets expressing their First Amendment rights. I think some people were not used to seeing that and would prefer if Muslims would just stay quiet as a genocide is unfolding before their very eyes.
Some say that the atmosphere now is similar to the weeks and months following 9/11.
I think that has to do with it having fallen out of the average American's consciousness. It was suddenly up close and personal after 9/11, and I think that created the atmosphere that you're talking about. Then all of a sudden, I think, following the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, it became something that was removed from everyday life in the United States for most of us. Although it's, obviously something that remained very personal to Muslim Americans. But for the most part, it was something that was happening over there and could be, put out of mind to a certain extent. Then, whenever there is some kind of attack, I think it comes back to the fore, and these tensions are reignited.
The Council on American Islamic Relations say that there are obvious gaps that need to be bridged.
I think it's already been said, but Muslims were also victims on 9/11. Muslims have always been a part of New York City, have always been a part of New York State, and they will continue to be an incredibly important part of the fab work.
President Biden announced all combat troops will be out of Afghanistan by September 11th.
The chaotic and deadly U.S. evacuation from Afghanistan stunned Americans and the world and cost the lives of 13 U.S. soldiers. Now a damning new report blames the Biden administration for being slow to evacuate U.S. citizens and Afghan allies.
Post 9/11 came the war in Afghanistan and the subsequent rise of the Taliban. American soldiers volunteered willingly, driven by a shared goal to wipe out terrorism and prevent such an attack against America ever again. And that included American Muslims. Mansour Shams had joined the U.S. Marines a year before the 9/11 attack happened. He was a dedicated Marine, proud to serve his country, and when the U.S. declared war on terror, Mansour wholeheartedly offered up every piece of regional insight, linguistic skill, and experience he had, wanting to do his part in the wake of such tragedy.
Yeah, I think that's good. My purpose in joining the Marine Corps was sort of twofold. One was to sort of kind of give back to a country who welcomed me in as a small immigrant child. And that was one way of paying gratitude. But I think that the part where there was some pushback from members of the family was not because I was Muslim and because I was joining the Marines. It was, I think, like any other family member, this fear that you could be sent off to war and as a result be dead. And of course, no one wants to lose a family member. So that's, to set the record straight, that was the reason behind those feelings of family members saying, hey, don't join. But I did end up joining. It was about nearly a year into my service in the Marine Corps. And I recall being on Camp Lejeune, or Camp Johnson specifically, a base in North Carolina. And just like everyone else, we didn't have the level of internet technology. I feel old by saying this, but we didn't have all that social media and things popping up on our phones. And it came to us through as I recall it, and I hope my memory serves me correctly, it was a television at the center of our, it was like this hall, and I worked on the administrative side of things, so it's kind of going back and forth between the office and to this location, and that's when we heard of these attacks, and of course, just like everyone, there's a shock of disbelief. Is it actually happening? Confusion. And then, very soon thereafter, the military base starts taking, precautions. We started going on lockdown. I think there was one of our sergeants, he was sent to the front of the base with go to the armory, pick up the weapon, and go guard the front of the base. So yeah, I remember that situation quite vividly, and I think it was a crazy time for many of us who lived it. Probably one of the few Muslims that at least I knew of in the military at the time, in the Marine Corps. So just making them aware that, look, I have these unique skill sets, and I'm ready to essentially go wherever I need to be sent. Because just like any other American, I was horrified and I was angry, and I was in a very unique position because that's what I signed up for, right? To go now, defend the nation.
Mansour says that everything changed for him following 9/11.
I had 1 year of prior service prior to these 9/11 attacks, so I saw the Marine Corps prior to, and then I saw it after, right? And so there's no doubt that I was a bit shocked with the level of Islamophobia. That wasn't a common word at the time, but that's what it was, that I felt. And after these attacks and this association of people who look like me, and you wouldn't expect that in the Marine Corps, because you've gone through that journey, that path, you've earned the title of U.S. Marine. So it's essentially a brotherhood that is there, and so those things are not supposed to exist. That's what the Marine Corps, the United States military, till this day prides itself on, that you can come from any faith, any culture, any background. In fact, the world, I think, looks at the United States military in a fascinating way. Like how, if you look at the Chinese military, or, I don't know, the Saudi military, or Russian military, whatever it is, right? You'll find people that all look the same, right? But when you look at the United States, like that, they are not the same. I mean, there are Hispanics, there's black, there's white, there's Muslim, whatever you want, everybody's there, right? And for that body of people, that diversity of body to still work in such an effective way, it is really a hallmark of the U.S. military, to be honest. But yes, at that time, those things did happen where, I started being, jokingly, Marines would make comments of, terrorists or Taliban or Osama bin Laden. And it wasn't fun. It was not fun. I think that had I not gone through those experiences, maybe I would have still been in the Marine Corps right today.
Mansour says that the continued and sustained Islamophobia he has felt since 9/11 has not only changed his outlook on life, but driven him to do something to help try to change the situation. He's established a movement called MuslimMarine.org and campaigns to reduce Islamophobia inside and outside of the U.S. military.
I think now, again, going back and thinking in hindsight, that the purpose of my service in the United States Marine Corps was not just those 4 years. It was actually for the stuff that I do now. It was for me to give back in a very unique and interesting way, because I have a very unique platform, let's be honest, right? I'm someone who is a proud Muslim who served this nation in an honorable way in its elite force, the United States Marine Corps. And the combination of those things, the Muslim and the Marine, allows me to engage in very all sorts of conversations to counter hate and bigotry and Islamophobia, but to also engage, conversation and dialogue. Whether it's specifically around the Muslim faith, which is obviously clearly till this day misunderstood, and there's rampant Islamophobia that still exists today.
"23 years have passed. Today, each flower by each name, a sign of the love and loss still present. The enduring legacy of 9/11, lives devastated, altered forever, reshaped, and rebuilt. And the reverberations are still felt today around the world in foreign policy decisions, in international relations, and in the personal lives of those directly impacted, among them survivors, with their lifelong mission and a promise to never forget."